Good morning. Saturday, no driving. Um, I'm Casey as always. Saturday is our campaign recap of my Monday night game. So last week I took you through the beginning of the game, the first couple sessions, and into the beginning of the third. We left our band of adventurers with the encounter with the elven ship Donsong and Captain Andari's Stillbreeze. Now, this is the encounter that I was talking about previously, where the ship encountered a crystallized rose and chose to leave it where it was. What they were not aware of at the time, and what they actually did not become aware of because they left it where it was that the rose was actually a grave marker for Andori's daughter, who had been killed in one of the great elven wars in the recent years. It was actually in a war against the Illithid near the Red Eye area. Basically, the Illithid had attempted to expand outwards from their base in Red Eye. The elves had said, no, you're not doing that. And Andari's daughter got caught up in the conflict. And so in that area, on the way towards Red Eye, he left that gravestone for her. And it was actually protected with some very powerful magics that, well, for one, would have caused some bad effects for the crew, and for two, would have let Andari's know that someone had messed with it. So, yeah, this encounter ended up being a peaceful one. It could have been very different had that Rose been on the ship at the time. Now, it ended up being a simple meeting between Andari's and our adventurers. Andari's explained to them that there was a bad situation in Red Eye, that the Illithid were gone, and that the previous slave races were now in a bad way. They were starving, they were struggling. The crew informed them that they were on their way with food and supplies to trade, and the elves basically said, go on your way, thank you. Excuse me. From there, then, the ship did continue on its way, and it arrived in Red Eye. Now, in Red Eye, the crew found that there were 4 main factions that it was possible to deal with. And I gave the captain of the ship and his crew options on which of these groups you want to find out more information about. Now, the 4 groups that we had were a group of predominantly humans, a group of Gith. Now, for those who are not familiar, you might have heard of the Githyanki or the Githzerai. Both of those actually spawn out of a single race called the Gith. So these are not Githyanki or Githzerai, but they are the base race that both of those come from. There was also, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing whenever you say it rather than see it, there's also a group of Gith. So Gith, as in Githyanki Githzerai, Gith. Gith, Giff, a group of large hippopotamus-like people who are native to Spelljammer. And there is a group of those who apparently had been captured by the Illithid and held as slaves. And the final group, a very small group, but a very noticeable one, is a group of Neogi. Now, Neogi, if you're not familiar with Spelljammer, are a race of small, spider-like creatures who are intensely evil, known for their very rigid slave caste system and for enslaving anyone they possibly can. So, a very interesting group to find as slaves themselves. There were actually a number of reasons why they were held as slaves, which the adventurers never discovered because they chose to investigate all of the groups except for the Neogi. The ship's captain had had previous dealings with Neogi and made the decision right off the bat that he was having nothing to do with them, did not want to find out any more about them, and basically completely wrote them off the table at the very start. In retrospect, possibly not the best of decisions because of some things that it triggered off. But they didn't know that at the time. So he met with the other groups. The humans were led by an elderly gentleman by the name of Cassian, who offered the most money out of the three groups for the food, but who was very proud. The captain's initial impression of Cassian was that, yes, they're probably struggling, but Cassian does not want to admit that they're struggling. Very much the kind of, well, we'll buy the food from you, but that's it. We don't really want to tell you our sob story. We're fine. We just need food. Let us buy it. The next one, Nithram, the Gith, Gith leader, offered slightly less money than the humans because they did not have as much money. But what they did also offer was a pair of artifacts, a pair of cultural relics, which the captain was immediately interested in. The last group, the GIF, GIFF, offer the least money, but also offer the services of his own men as part of the payment. Now, the GIF are a very warrior-like race that is almost universally mercenaries. Mercenaries are their export. So the services of a platoon of GIF is actually worth quite a lot. And basically their thing was, if you give us the food, we'll give you what money we have, and we will work for you until we've worked off the rest. Now, of those three groups, the captain and crew decided to spend a bit more time with the GIF, G-I-T-H, with Nithram's people. And in that, they went to their camp. They saw these two relics that Nithram had talked about. A pair of masks. The Silver Mask of Duality and the Shadowed Mask of Duality. Now these are custom items that I built for the campaign. Very powerful relics, artifacts. And, of course, the crew is very interested in getting these items. So, they basically make a deal with Nithram and say, okay, what we'll do then is, it's getting near the end of the day. Tomorrow morning, we'll have our people deliver the food, and we'll pick up, we'll exchange payment at that point. Now, Bill, one of the members of the crew, who is an ogre, a quite smart ogre actually, which is a bit odd, but he has noticed the significance that these masks have. Some of the Gith are actually worshipping them. They seem to have a very religious significance. So he decides that he feels a bit bad taking these relics from them, and wants to at least leave them with something. So he actually stays up through the evening crafting a duplicate image of the masks. Now, obviously, it won't have the same magical effects, but his thought process was that at least it gives them a symbol of the item that they can still continue to look upon. Dawn rolls around. Teowin, who's our elven bard, is up early to meet Bill, see how he's going on with the masks. And as the two of them are there, they start to hear screams in the distance, which of course is never a good thing for the players. They alert the others. They all go rushing towards the sound of the screams, which it does turn out to be is the Gith camp. When they arrive, the Gith have been slaughtered. The silver mask, which was on a pedestal in the middle of the camp, is missing. They begin searching, and finally they find a single Gith. See, I'm getting my words mixed up now. A single Gith still alive. And they see that this Gith is wearing the shadowed mask and is fighting against two hippo people, and one of them has a Neogi on its shoulder. Now, bear in mind, the Gith are large. They are actually large-sized creatures, built like a hippopotamus that walks on two legs. The Neogi are small size. So, gnome, halfling, things like that. So this creature is actually perched on its shoulder as it's fighting. Sinclair, our Gromham captain, charges forward and attacks. He manages to beat both of the Gith unconscious. However, the Neogi escapes. The last Gith who was standing, who was wearing the mask, at some point in that conflict, is killed. And when they take the mask from him, trying to basically check and see if he's okay, if they can do anything, they realize that it is Nithrim, the leader of the Gith. It was quite an intense scene, because a few of these players had not really played in one of my games before, and essentially their first combat in the game was in a slaughtered refugee camp. And I think maybe some of them thought I would ease them into things a bit more. I mean, the combat itself didn't end up being that complicated. It was two barbarians, basically, and a sorcerer. And as soon as it went badly, the sorcerer ran for it. You know, that was the extent of that. But the scene that they were in, I think, was a bit intense. And that's actually what we called Session 3. That was the end of Session 3, with them standing over the dead body of Nithrim. Excuse me. Session 4, we picked up. Sinclair, our captain, dragged the two unconscious Gith out into the open, tied them up, and then woke them, and began trying to interrogate them. This didn't go very well. The Gith are trained soldiers. Their entire society is based around following orders, doing what you're told by your superior, not by anyone, just by your superior, and obeying. So if they're given a mission, they're given an order, and they're told not to speak of it, they don't speak of it. And they're very hardy creatures that are very difficult to physically intimidate. After a little while of that, Tiowen decided, okay, enough of this, and cast Suggestion. Now the Gif are resistant to magic. That's another one of their nifty things. But they're not immune to it. And this one rolled badly. Failed his save against Suggestion. And at that point, things turned around for the group. They started getting the information they needed. They found out that the Neogi had made a contract with the GIF. Basically, that the GIF would work for the Neogi, and the GIF would then get a share of the food. But this particular GIF knew nothing about the extraction plan. He was never told what the next step was. He wasn't the commander. He wasn't in charge. The Neogi was in charge. He got told, come in here and kill these people. He came in here and killed these people. What happened after that was for the Neogi to tell him. He didn't really... That's very much how the GIF are. Do this now, and then once you've done this, what's the next order? Except for those who are in positions of command, that's really how they are. It's just their nature, the way they're raised, the way that they're wired. So then they make their way back towards the docks after getting this information. On their way back, they come rushing into contact with another group of people that they had no idea who they were. A human, a minotaur, a dwarf, basically, for intents and purposes, although the players didn't know it at the time, this was another adventuring group, led by Captain Weston Dalmore. And they were coming to investigate the sounds that they'd been hearing as well. The two groups spoke, didn't really seem to get on very well. Our group seemed very focused on moving on and getting to what they were trying to do, and didn't really seem interested in interacting with this other group. So I left it at that, really. It's a pity, because this other group could have provided them a lot of information, which would have helped. But they didn't seem interested in it, so they moved on, they went their separate ways, and that was the end of that. Our crew made their way towards the GIF camp, and found it empty, found it packed up, found it abandoned. And one thing that I did miss was that our group did inform the other group that they believed the Neogi were at fault, and got the other captain to agree that his crew would help to protect the docks and make sure that the Neogi did not board any vessels there. They returned to the docks, and at the moment there are 3 ships in dock. And at this point they've realized that it's their ship, it's this Captain Dalmore's ship, and it's a 3rd ship, a dragon ship. Now, a dragon ship does not mean it's a ship with dragons on it. It means it's a ship that is stylized to look like a dragon. They find that the dragon ship is preparing to depart. Now, they don't know who's on the dragon ship, but they figure it's suspicious because Weston's group said they're not working with the Neogi. They're fairly sure they're not working with the Neogi. So if the Neogi are trying to get out of here, it's on that 3rd ship. But as that ship is beginning to depart, fate strikes. Or, rather, timing strikes, and an ivory tower appears. Now, out of character, the players have known this is coming, because they've overheard some of the scenes that I've had with Susha, who's on board the tower with his uncle. In character, I don't think they thought it would arrive that quickly. And the tower arrives, and Shanshora makes a show of it. He actually commands an army of iron golems. And he begins teleporting them onto the docks. Dozens of them. Probably more than dozens of them. Possibly close to 100 of them. Iron golems. Big iron golems. Not something to be messed with. And the docks are full of them. And then once they're there, and once everyone is kind of frozen in place thinking, I'm not going to make a wrong move against all of these golems, then Shanshora teleports himself and Susha onto the docks. When he arrives there, the dragon ship is still frantically trying to depart. And I think at this point, the players had realized the Neogi were certainly on board. But Shanshara, in an annoyed contempt, as a show of power, basically, turned around with a rod in his hand, pointed it, and disintegrated the entire dragon ship. Basically just to make a point. The dragon ship's trying to depart. Our players are trying to get to the dragon ship to stop it from departing. Shanshara's just basically saying, look, I don't really care what they're doing. I don't really care what you're doing. But it's interfering with what I want to do, so stop it. And that was basically all of the thought Shanshara gave it. Disintegrated the ship with everyone on board. And then came the deals. The Arcane love deals. Love deals. The Arcane are all about deals. And, of course, he has Susha prisoner. Now, yes, Susha is his nephew, but that doesn't really mean anything. He can still profit from it. Think of the Arcane kind of like the Ferengi. They'll sell out anybody for the right price. So, the first deal that he makes is that he will trade Susha back to the group in exchange for ownership of the experiment. I was actually a bit surprised that they didn't negotiate this a lot more. But they agreed to it on the provision of a second deal, where Sinclair then agrees to rent the experiment back from Shanshara for 20,000 gold per month. And Shanshara then adds a clause that also includes that they provide him with any information he might find interesting. And they agreed. So they got Susha back. The experiment, which they're now starting to call Mr. X, stays with them. And in exchange, they pay Susha. They pay Shanshara 20,000 gold a month. Yeah, so Red Eye was a very intense place for them. And from there, they set off towards Brawl. Sinclair still wanted to go to Brawl because he still wanted to meet with his contact about the blade, the sword that he had heard legend of. They knew it was going to take them a while to get to Brawl, but he wanted to head in that direction. So their next port of call, Stormbreak, in the sphere of Storm. It's an asteroid port They knew it was primarily a giant port, but not only giant. They purchased some supplies when they get there, including paying a lot of money, and I'm talking, they paid 185,000 gold for a rare psi crystal. There was additionally a meeting between Bill and another ogre named Saitor, who owned a jewelry shop. Quite a rare profession for an ogre, being a jeweler. But he actually found that although he could not work with small finesse jewelry because he has an ogre's hands, kind of like mine, big, stumpy fingers and all that. When it came to building jewelry for giants, who are much larger, the fine detail was much larger, and he could do that. And he enjoyed it. And he made a lot of money doing it. They had an interesting meeting, basically starting out because they're trying to sell Saitor a helm. And in the process, Saitor ends up mentioning to Bill a hint about a place called Vonenheim, which was referred to as the Titan home. And there was a bit of interesting dialogue there between them where Saitor kind of accidentally goes into his desire to find Vonenheim and how this helm that they're selling him. Bear in mind, I'm talking about a spelljamming helm, not a helm that you wear. A helm that powers a ship. They had salvaged a spare one. And Bill and Saitor have an interesting conversation, and Saitor actually ends the conversation by saying to Bill that if he ever wants to seek Vonenheim, he should come find him. And the group that had gone to sell the items then goes back to the ship. And as they do, Sinclair and Mr. X have a heart-to-heart conversation where Sinclair apologizes for the recent events. He's starting to feel really bad about the fact that he basically sold Mr. X into slavery and then rented him back. Don't know why he would have felt bad about that, but he did. And so he actually brings Mr. X a box of crystals, including the psi crystal that they paid so much money for. And at that point, when Mr. X was about to take possession of those crystals, is where we ended session 4. And with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and end today's video as well. We'll pick up in session 5 next Saturday, and we'll talk about what happened when the Crystal Man touched the psychic crystal. Until then, like, subscribe, all that stuff. I'll put my homebrew stuff in the links as always. Have a great weekend. I won't be posting anything tomorrow. I'll see you Monday morning on the way to work.